So avoidance strategies, it sounds quite negative, it's actually quite positive. There's an aside in this, which is, when you get to my age, composing can be quite difficult. Why should I compose another piece? I very often record something quite interesting, well, I think it's interesting. Time stretch it, apply a few envelopes to create cadences and onsets and things, and then add a few more things, and well, it's a piece, and it only took a couple of hours. So, in order to stretch this a little bit, there's also the electroacoustic thing going on, which I'll mention a little bit. There's also an aside where I never felt as if I was quite fully an electroacoustic composer. There again, I don't feel as if I'm fully a visual music person either, so it's quite an interesting thing. So I get around with a lot of these things by collaborating. I feel that, like a lot of composers probably, I sit in a small room, concentrate very hard, come out occasionally into the daylight and blink quite a lot. And I'm very much in charge of things. Whereas in reality, what I do is collaborate, and it's bouncing those ideas around where things really start to happen. So I collaborate with Nick Cope. He's not here, he lives in China now. Met Nick at the University of Hull, where we worked with Rob. And one evening, he mixed live some video in a cinema, and it was just 2 lines of analog video and a simple mixer, and you could just switch between the 2 lines. One line was very abstract, the other one was quite straightforward, literal. It was clear what the images were. And I thought, this is a charismatic video. So afterwards I informed him that we'd be collaborating, and that was probably about 15, 16 years ago now. So we've done quite a few pieces. The other thing is that the pieces are variable. I don't know what other people think about them, that's different. But from my perspective, some of them seem to be quite successful, and some of them not so successful. And, I've very often been accused of being far too honest. I'm not quite a compulsive truth teller, but, I relate these things to the ref. And there's a research question in there. Why did that piece not work quite so well? We tend to do things longhand. We're gloriously non-techy. Well, I feign incompetence so that people leave me alone. But if we wanted an image that was multi-layered, several colours laid on top of each other with an undulation, well, the one way we could do that is just by shining different coloured lights onto some water and filming it. So rather than trying to do it in software, I do have a PhD student who does a lot of these things in software, and I'm okay with the narrative. I let him get on with the technical side, and I collaborate with someone from computing who understands that much more than I. But I'm suggesting to him that, me and Nick supply him with content, and then he uses that to make things. So maybe it does get more technical. The strategies as well. They're ways of propelling the piece, or the compositional kind of outcomes. And I spent a lot of time thinking about these strategies. I'm not sure that the end result and the strategy always ties up. But what it did was it got me to the point where we could get to something. So there's a couple of strategies in particular that have been going on for years now, and I keep using the idea. And it seems to propel me about 2/3 of the way through a piece. But at the end, I end up being this composer, and I just move things around because it sounds better. So, but I think that's okay. I think there's an element there where I should be allowed to do that. So the visual music aspect, because it's very filmic and what I do is very concrete, we do go to a lot of conferences which are ostensibly visual music, and we don't really sit in very well with the more animated pieces. I don't think this is going to change. We're trying a piece at the moment where we're working on many more transitions. A lot of things that we've done tend to be just very closely edited, lots and lots of editing. In fact, sometimes weeks and weeks of just editing individual little moments together, and that's how we make things work. So we're working on a piece of piano, for example. There's a piece that perhaps come out in about 6 months' time, which is piano, percussion, and video, which is a play on Stockhausen's Cantata, with a video, obviously, as well as electronic sound. And in that, we're actually stopping. It's difficult because Nick's in China, so we have to kind of communicate in a slightly longhand way. And I said, well, this moment here actually is a fade. It's not going to be an edit. I'm going to fade over about 2 seconds. Will you please do the same, or maybe a counter fade, so there's one closes, the other one opens, something like that. So it is quite laborious. With this piece, the word ambience obviously is going to feature somewhere. And when I play this video, each screen is it has a little bit of editing that I've pretty much ignored. It's quite static. I think of ambience in this sense, almost like room temperature. It doesn't necessarily have any change in tempo, change in dynamic level. It sits there. The original piece is called Flags 1, which, not unsurprisingly, was a single screen. We then doubled the length of the piece so that we got more space to work. We added a second screen, and I started to move information from the original recording into a new space and do extra things to it. Not much more than just looping. The materials are very, very simple. Starting to question how the musical aspect could fit together with the video without actually doing any Mickey Mousing, just letting the two things almost reside side by side without really asking too many questions. We added a third screen, and now there's a fourth layer of sound. The piece is only stereo, but the strategy very often kind of hits this point where we're thinking about editing. What does it mean to actually edit something? And how do we deal with where those edits should be? That's really what the strategy is about. I think in this piece, I was thinking almost along the lines of a string quartet. There was no strings in there, but the sounds are very exposed because there isn't an awful lot going on. There's a lot of space. It's a pseudo-document, obviously. The images are shot in Tibet. The title, my titles tend to be short and pithy. I've written a piece for the Osmanberg recently, and it's called Pith, because I wanted a pithy title. Nick's tend to be much more flowery, and I don't actually challenge him on whether he is a Buddhist or not. I'm an atheist, unless I'm airborne, that's my joke. I've got some air crash jokes, actually, if you want to hear them later. Yeah, it's a pseudo-document, so all the sound comes from Scarborough. There's nothing to do with the image, obviously. So, recording metallic objects in a small studio, in the studios as there were in Scarborough a few years ago. The environmental sound, wind sound, which obviously is going to be some, is me sitting in a Citroen Picasso in Scarborough on a windy day, with the window open, so I've got the shielding of the car to get rid of the wind noise in the microphone. And that's it, really. Not much processing, bit of time stretching. The sounds themselves, very straightforward, consonant. They don't ask many questions. So this is what I presented. I'll just play you a short clip. When Nick had done the final edit a few weeks ago, he uploaded this in China. It took about 40 hours to upload. So it has slowed us up a little bit. Actually, I quite like 14 hours. I'm a big fan of the ZDP system. That's a short amount of time. This is an aside. It's just a bit of fun, really. When I'm sitting there wondering how to start a piece, answering emails, I invited Joe Hyde to do a talk at my university a few years ago. And he was talking about audio-visual material, and I said to him, how do you start work? What I meant was, do you start with visuals or audio or both at the same time? And he went white and he just said, how do I start? I answer lots of emails. And I kind of got that. So I looked at other examples. This is obviously an Eno oblique strategist kind of thing. And Film Man's an era. I haven't got dates for these. I did look, but this is when I used to read Melody Maker in the 1970s. Was preparing for the album 801 Live, and he, in rehearsal in the studio, said to the recording engineer, who was unseen, it was on a different floor, the control room, just record when you feel like it, don't let us know. And the results were quite interesting. Zuke talked again in Melody Maker, talking about putting a transistor radio in the corner of the studio, in the studio floor, and just have it playing in the background while you improvise or work on something. And obviously it changes the perspective. Detuning, something I do quite a lot. I tend to build things in samplers that I forget what's what, a bit like a prepared piano, so the results are slightly unknown. Just get things going. I tend to play Minesweeper a lot, and I tend to play it in a way where I start off quite slowly and I go as fast as I possibly can, so I'm clicking very, very quickly. And and then I start composing, it just seems to work. Anyway, that one isn't to be taken too seriously. So in the background, how we ended up at this point where Nick and myself kind of seemed to get on quite well creatively. Both of our backgrounds are quite similar. So before university, I used to play in bands. We had a 2-hour set with no major or minor triads at one point. We weren't very popular, but we also used to take reboxes on stage, that kind of thing. He also worked in Scratch Video, Cabaret Voltaire, was on stage a lot doing live video, mixing, that kind of thing, projections and whatever. So it seems to fit. Around the time that Rupert Eno No Pussyfooting came out in 1974, I was 14. I'm not going to say I used to be a punk or anything like that, I'm not quite there yet. But a family friend had a tape machine, he was a speech therapist, he retired, he gave it to me, and I tried to emulate these things at that age. I had a Les Paul copy, and it seemed to me that the tape recorder was a time machine, and it allowed me to produce ambient things quite easily. I'd got a delay, and I could record on one track, and then transfer that track onto the unrecorded track, as well as adding a live element each time, keep bouncing. And I haven't really moved on, so I've been doing that for 44 years now. Another moment which kind of informs a lot of what I do, which is quite flippant, which is Tim Suster layered about I think it was an 8-track tape machine, 8 lines of pitched information, and then just through a mixer, just put it through a wah-wah pedal, and I thought, pitch, timbre, the relationship's quite easy to see, and that was at an open day at Kiel when I, was about 14. And then I went off and did some very unsuccessful things musically, and then ended up back at Kiel, pretty much for these reasons. I didn't look around anywhere else, I just had to live down the road, and I just went. I'm also interested in the idea, I think it's timely, looking at, I'm going to have to speed up here, that without me trying to claim, back in the day when I did a degree, electronic music was quite a broad thing. It seemed to me that it was equally likely that we talk about Eno or Tangerine Dream or Pierre Schaeffer in the same room at the same time. And I feel as if I've been focused and channeled in certain directions since then, which has kind of interrupted this slightly. And what we seem to be doing, which I completely approve of, is look for common ancestors. We're kind of going back in time, finding nodal points, and then reawakening these things. I think that the Hang On, I Think I Can Swing It paper written recently by Adrian Moore is kind of similar thing. It seems to me if we look at Schaeffer and repeated information in the early pieces, it's there anyway. We just seem to have forgotten about it. We need to go back and have another look. Okay, so this is a more typical thing. I'll just play a few seconds of this. So this is quite rapid in times, lots of editing. So the theory is in our mind that if there is such a thing as just listening, that the audio side has what you might call a literal and an abstract component, and so does the video. So if that's the case, then you've got a 4-part harmony within those 2 strands of information. I'm not sure we actually do anything with this. I think it's just an interesting idea at the moment. I've said it in front of quite a few people at conferences, and it tends to go down quite well, particularly afterwards, conversations about how does it actually work, and I don't think we know how it actually works. It's just a notion, it's a strategy. This is some more of the detail on the piece that is going to be on later. I had a very limited palette of material. Each sound was quite distinctive, it did a particular job. I got this encouraging. I quite like the idea that it's rather like playing chess against yourself, because I'm not in an ensemble, but I can create what would be a limited set of possibilities, work with those, and then add something else that's limited and start to layer things. Put it in the right place or somewhere near is this notion of editing, which of course audiovisually is quite difficult because we're already editing two modalities at the same time. If there are chords, they're just sounds, there's no dynamic forces between the objects. Complexity essentially comes from layering, if it is complex indeed. Sometimes the layers contain only sine waves, so I see that as a form of synthesis. Rather than layering pictures or complex objects, just layering sine waves anyway eventually becomes a form of synthesis. The slight indeterminate way in which the layers are put together means that everything is slightly indeterminate, but within limits. If something really doesn't work, I wade in and change things. The straightforward nature of the materials means that they fit together almost in any permutation. It's not a fugue. I'm not getting to the point where the themes don't line up harmonically and then I have to unravel it and start at the beginning. It just flows. The other thing that was quite interesting composing the piece was this notion that Eric Tam makes the point that ambience very often means low dynamics, and it means not building things, because clearly if you build something, you're going to have to address the thing that you built, and you're going to have to do something with it. You're going to have to either dismantle it or create a cadence or something. So this is a technique that I use to build things quite quickly sometimes. Each machine's just got a loop. Loops are just fed into a mixer. The mute buttons on the mixer are just used as almost like piano keys, and I just play things. Obviously, there's an intervention here in that you make the loops in the first place, so within limits, you know what's going to happen pretty much. But about 90% of it is usually unusable, and 10% of it is quite exciting, and just keep those bits. I think it's a common theme. Lutoslawski wrote, throws away 90% of his material and just keeps the good bit at the end of the day. That kind of makes sense. And then there's a process of analysis. So this just look at the diagram, essentially making connections between objects. And of course, there's ambiguities going on, and selecting the objects that seem to belong to each other through some of these slightly open-ended processes. So, what we found is that, I'll kind of talk through some of these slides quite quickly. They look quite, I think like riffing is doing better than my longhand. What we found is that we're looking for some kind of glue. So in the midst of these materials that don't do very much, we're looking at points where there's obviously consonances happening and things that lead to connections being made. And what we find is that the glue is very sticky. So I presume, obviously, we're not alone in this. And Shion makes the point that if connections are not made systematically by whoever's making a piece of work, then the audience will search out those connections anyway. So the job's been done for you by the audience in a sense. And in this case, this piece written a few years ago, we were in a rush, the ref was coming along, and I sent Nick the wrong sound file, and he striped it to the video anyway, and it worked. I didn't tell the ref panels this, because, but hey, I'm allowed to do these things. I'm a composer. It's a given. And this is just a quick. We did go in and edit and change things and polish where we needed to, but it still worked. So the question then becomes, where do those edits reside? If the glue is sticky and the thing seems to work anyway, what we're doing is re-evaluating. So we're taking something and almost plunging from ourselves to rework it, so we are at another level. Years ago, Roger Marsh tried to teach me, and he said the same thing. He just said, well, what you seem to be doing is making things, and then you're kind of stretching the sound file and then just sitting there and looking at it. Why don't you throw an explosive in of some sort and break it up? Recollect the bits that you then made and just reorder them. And it seemed to make complete sense to me. So, that sounds quite dramatic. In our case, it might just be to cut the thing into two. It doesn't have to be lots and lots of components. I also look for visual counterpoints to some of these ideas, simply because we work audio-visually. And my visual acumen is 0. And to be honest, Nick's audio acumen is also 0. So we need to spend time actually looking into each other's territory a bit more. And I do things like this. And again, it's a strategy. I'm not saying that this translates in an absolute sense to the way in which I compose, but it chimes, it makes some kind of sense. So it's obvious that what I'm trying to describe here is visually represented by this image. So I won't point at the patterns, we can see where if we remove the edits, as it were, and replaced everything back as it was, that's the kind of thing that's happening. So the edit starts to become quite a thing. And if we progress in time, where the edits were have started to become part of the foreground in proper. They've changed their relationship. It's started to become part of the image in there. It's not just the edit, it's something else. And I wondered whether we could foreground editing so that the edits themselves became part of the immediate experience of a piece, more than just being an edit, but actually being a moment which stood above. It's almost like it's a nested structure. So in this case, obviously, that foregrounding has been developed, and now it's standing out, and it becomes something which is significant structurally, whereas before it was just a technique that we had to have in order to add proportion to the piece. So this is my attempt at describing that. So there's the initial idea. There's decisions, then wherever those edits were made, there's a reordering, and we end up with a structure at the bottom, which is not a million miles away from the structure at the top. It's the same stuff. I then try and expand on these images, and again, do I actually do this? I mean, this one is a little bit like a sausage machine. You feed in the information at the beginning, you turn the handle, and you end up with the information at the end. So, material, musical ideas, and shapes. Those shapes are ordered into some kind of logic or musical shape. We then some analysis, editing, remove those decisions, you end up with this more complex shape, which you could then cut. I don't know where 5 ended up. I'm listening to Mr. 5. You then end up with this, and that's supposed to be the original material somehow. So you feed it back in at the beginning again. So I tend to use quite strict, simple bits of software where I can do this. Basically, I'm just taking the output and feeding the input. We all know that. But this is a slightly more complex way of describing the same thing. So, to sum up, the piece basically contains limited amount of material, limited amounts of editing, some sound design. The material is very consonant, very straightforward. If there is an interest in there, it's in the juxtaposition of the material, some loops of unequal length, that kind of thing. And the basic structure of each screen was added, is this simple, but within that there are loops happening that don't fit in precisely to those kinds of timings. But there's more or less a 10-minute piece, 2 5-minute pieces, 3 third-length pieces, and 4 quarter-length pieces. And I didn't move much around. So in order to make it work, I didn't put much in the first place. And this is the piece, or a section of it that we see played later.